As much as I want to assume you know what Skins and or the third generation of Skins is, I can't in good conscience make such an ass out of myself from jump, so Skins was a fairly successful British teen drama that ran for however many fucking seasons, I don't know, from 2007 to 2013. It was your standard TV show about teenagers getting up to no good and realizing their actions have consequences. What set it apart from a lot of teen shows at the time was how much heart it had, and how unafraid it was of pushing boundaries. Every 2 series, the cast would be replaced with a different cast, and these casts were called generations. So series 1 and 2 focused on the first generation, which is my favorite generation. You didn't ask, but it's important for me to be upfront about my own biases. More on that later. Series 3 and 4 focused on the second generation, which is probably the most popular. When Skins was gaining a lot more popularity outside of the UK, a lot of teenagers around the world were starting the show with the second generation. Lastly, series 5 through 6 focused on the third generation, which a lot of people really hate. It's not uncommon for Skins fans to suggest that people new to the show just don't even bother with the third generation. As for myself, I was a huge fan of Skins. Again, Generation 1. And when the new series came out with just Effie, I honestly lost interest. Eventually I went back to watch it, but it took me forever to do that. I never bothered to watch the third generation until about 2 years ago, shortly after I made a video about the American remake, and someone reached out to me asking if I wanted to collaborate on a video about Gen 3. I said yes, watched series 5 and 6, reached out to my new collaborator only for them to never respond to my messages again. I feel like this was just an elaborate trick to get me to watch. Well played. Gen 3's reputation as being the most meh of the series, the last whimper before the show crawled into its grave, is what I want to delve into today. Because now that it's been 10 years since the third generation was first introduced to audiences, I'm curious about how the show has aged, if it has more merit than it gets credit for, and, more importantly, was this generation really that bad? And if so, why? The third generation is often singled out as being the worst one, but what makes it so bad? Are the stories of the previous generations just so amazing that everything is going to pale in comparison? To answer that, I guess we'd first have to acknowledge what made Skins so special back in 2007. At the time, teen shows in America looked like the abysmal secret life of the American teenager, which is so bad, and if you want to know how bad it is but you don't want to watch it, not to worry, because Julia Cudney's got you covered, alright? There was Degrassi Next Generation, Friday Night Lights, and the birth of Gossip Girl. And the drama was soap operatic as fuck, highlighting the spectacle of chaos and rarely the humans at the center of it. Skins was a stripped back and slightly dialed down version of this, where there was definitely drama and there was definitely chaos, but it was done so with a defined focus on the characters at the center of it all. One of the most chaotic episodes of Skins Generation 1 is Chris's episode. I say one of because we all know the most dramatic, definitively, is fucking Effie's. In this episode, we see the first glimpse of Chris's home life. We see his mother has basically abandoned him, we see him lose his home, we see his estranged relationship with his father, and we learn about the death of his older brother. Just saying it sounds like a fuck ton of histrionics packed into one episode, something that would induce eye-rolling and the inability to suspend disbelief, but the way it's actually handled is quite delicate, and Joe Dempsey's performance lends itself well to the balancing act between introspective character study and comedy. For Chris's episode, you see the sensitivity with which these difficult topics are handled, but it's not just Chris. The early episodes of Skins have such an empathy and execution for its characters. Cassie, Jal, and even Sid's episodes are simple but powerful. The challenges they face are profound but believable. Cassie is pretending to have overcome her eating disorder and easily fools everyone but Sid. The crush she has on Sid is thereby intensified by the fact that he can see right through her act, that he can see her. Jal's episode is honestly one of my favorites. In the Skins fandom, Jal is constantly overlooked and minimized. Fans have called her the most boring, but she's my favorite for the very reasons that others dismiss her. She's level-headed, responsible, and a genuinely good friend.
What are you doing?
Comforting you.
Her conflicts are quiet, whether it has to do with her relationship with her mother who's left her, or her relationship with her father who doesn't know how to talk to her. Her father, a famous and successful musician, doesn't even seem to support her choice in music and basically calls her a sellout.
I got my competition on Saturday, not that you care.
Rooty tooty music. Maybe you like dancing for Whitey.
In the climax of this episode, Jal and Sid are attacked and the perpetrators smash Jal's clarinet.
Fucking bastards! I'll get you! He's helping me, you twats!
The episode ends with Zhao finding the new clarinet her father bought for her, and even though they don't patch things up, they understand each other a little bit better, and it's actually quite sweet. In her friend group, Zhao is there for everyone, and you can see from her episode that it's rare for anyone to be there for her in the same way. That's her conflict. She's surrounded by people, yet she's often alone. When Jamie Britton conceptualized the show, it started with him criticizing his dad for writing the same shows about the same boring people, and he proposed, write a show about teenagers, but one that actually means something. Britton, who had been a student before dropping out and creating Skins with his dad, had seen all the teen dramas and didn't enjoy most of them. He wanted to make a show about teenagers that felt realistic and adventurous at the same time. He wanted actual teenagers, and he wanted them to look like teenagers and not for it to be so glossy and so glamorous. My peers at university would watch things that were ostensibly for young people. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The OC, and Dawson's Creek, and also things like As If and Hollyoaks. And with the exception of Buffy, I hated all of them. On reflection, I can see good things in the OC and even in Dawson's Creek, but back then they just seemed deeply patronizing. Everyone looked so perfect to the point of it actually being really quite unattractive. And that was Skins. With the writer's room full of teenagers and 20-year-olds, there was a lot of genuine honesty about the portrayal of adolescence, up to and including hiring actual teenagers, the decision to make the cast's wardrobe simple and sometimes even a bit tacky, the decision for most of the cast to not be given a lot of makeup to wear. So, the significance of Skins wasn't just about the grounded stories or the interesting characters. It was about the super young writer's room and the hiring cast of unknown, fresh-faced, actual teenage actors. Nicholas Hoult was 17 during the time of filming. Dev Patel was 16. The oldest person in the main cast was Joe Dempsey, and he was only 19. Now, again, what makes the third generation so exceptional, so different? In series 5 and 6, nearly everything that made the show so groundbreaking in its heyday is absent. The conflicts, whether internal or external, are uninspired and without nuance. The characters are uninteresting. Actually, no, I take that back. They had one interesting character, and by series 6, they bludgeoned her to death. And worse yet, the way the stories are originally crafted, focusing on the humans at the center of chaos, was foregone in favor of amping up the drama. Series 5 was created with the intent to be a return to form after the depressing and incredibly dark and stupid Series 4. Jamie Britton, who began to play the role of showrunner while Brian Elsley went off gallivanting in Toronto to oversee MTV Skins, I'm not gonna say it, you already know, as showrunner, he'd stated that he wanted this generation to be a little more laid back and not so fucking depressing. We've heard this series will be a bit lighter. Is that right? I think it's lighter. I took the series quite dark over the last couple of years, which is fine, but I really wanted to do something as funny as possible this year. Light is probably not the right word, but it's certainly maybe a bit more easygoing. There's a lot of laughs and a lot of fun. As usual, there are dark places and there are unfortunate and sad events going on, but most of all, it's about friendship and love and people helping each other out. And in a way, that's exactly what Series 5 is. It's very simple, very surface level, and unfortunately that includes the heart and the friendships. It wants to focus on friendship and people helping each other out, but few of the relationships are strong enough to sustain the theme Britton wanted to uphold. Even though the series is meant to be a return to the days of empathetic character exploration and inspired bonding, it ends up being disjointed and ineffective. Somehow, Series 5 manages to be boring and melodramatic at the same time. It's odd because the writers are trying to find that balance between being laid back and maintaining enough conflict to keep everything interesting. What it ends up leaving you with, though, is a show that feels more immature than Skins ever has. They want to keep the drama, the foes and the frenemies and the teen angst, but they also want it to be in this mostly inoffensive world where everything is awesome and friendship is magic. They were kind of able to pull this off with the first generation, because even when things got really serious, there was a levity to it because of all the beautiful friendships, but they weren't able to do that again. The result is a version of Skins that feels a little bit more like Degrassi with profanity. And I'm not even talking next generation, baby, I'm talking next class.
Yeah, sorry. It's just, you've been really rude to me and it's not fair. Can you just stop being bitches so we can all be friends, okay?
For a decade now, fans have shared their theories on why the third generation is the way that it is. Some of the blame falls on Jamie Britton, some of it on Brian Elsley, who it actually belongs to. for no longer being the showrunner during this period, and others have theorized that the reason people don't like Gen 3 is because there's nothing connecting it to the previous generations. After the second series of Skins was concluded and was another big success, Brian Elsley was asked what plans he had for the show if it were to continue, and off the top of his head he answered, "All the characters are leaving, and we're getting new ones." This scared a lot of fans. They'd fallen in love with the characters, not just the show, and they'd already been dealt a blow with Chris's death, which, by the way, it's been, 13 years since that happened, and personally, I'm still not over it. Even though once Gen 2 arrived and 95% of the cast was new, it was easier to digest because Effie was still there. It read like Tony was passing down the torch or something. And after Gen 2 surpassed Gen 1 in popularity for whatever reason, it stood on its own quite well. I don't think not having a bridge between the generations was a major determinant to the lukewarm reception later seasons received. While it definitely was an element, the truth is that the show had been fizzling in popularity, and after the dark and unnecessary storylines from Series 4 up to and including Freddy's violent death, a lot of fans felt betrayed by the show and stopped watching before Gen 3 was even a thought. There were so many people who were critical of Season 4, calling it the worst season, messy and perplexing and rushed and just ill. Over the years, as the dust has settled, even more people have been more critical of this generation, including fans who once loved it. They bring up things like the characterization of Effie or the gratuitous death of Freddy, which people often cite as being the downfall of the show. It was at this point, when Freddy gets locked into a house with a horror movie villain, that people turned their back on Skins. So by the time the third generation came around, it honestly wouldn't have mattered if anyone from Gen 2 was there to bridge the gap. So if you want to blame the quality of this series on anything, we have plenty of other factors to look at, like our characters, or more specifically, how they're written. Our characters this time around consist of Franky, Rich, Manny, Liv, Aloe, Grace, and occasionally Maddie on the days he decides he wants to participate in the story and not just wander around being a little creep. Another thing that distinguishes this— holy shit, I forgot Nick. Nick he's there too. My bad. Another thing that distinguishes this group from the previous ones is that it takes a long time for them all to befriend each other. Grace, Liv, and Minnie are already besties, and Minnie is dating Nick, who is related to Maddie, which they both hate. Aloe and Rich are friends who also happen to be outsiders, so naturally, when Franky, another outsider, arrives in Bristol, these two are some of the first ones to interact with her properly. But all 8 of them bonding and getting together doesn't happen for a few episodes. Much of Series 5 is focused on how they bridge that gap between being strangers or enemies to being best mates. However, it's hard to appreciate the journey they're on because while the characters themselves do have interesting backgrounds and interesting qualities, the show not only has no idea what to do with them most of the time, but it has no idea how to give them agency. For 3 episodes, Liv is in the background playing second fiddle to Minnie's mean girl routine. We barely even get to know her through dialogue. She's carefree and incredibly allegiant to her best friend, even when she's in the wrong. Liv is supposed to be the cool, relaxed one, but that's all we know, and most of that is just from the amount of eye-rolling Liv does. And it's not just her. There's so much we don't know about these characters for so long that they feel like they're barely there for the majority of the season. Something I've always loved and still love about Gen 1 is how in the first episode each character is easily defined with just a few lines of dialogue. The way it's set up in the first episode, we're introduced to Tony, who calls all of his friends on the way to school, through which we're introduced to Sid, Chris, Jal, and the whole gang, I just said that. We get to see each character in their natural habitat. Jal is practicing her clarinet, Anwar should be praying and not answering the phone while in sajda, and it's fucking hilarious.
I can't talk right now.
By the end of this scene, you feel like you know what each character is like. Like you could see a line of dialogue and determine which one of them said it. No such scene exists for Gen 3, and by the way, I'm not saying that scene should exist. As effective as it would be, it would have also been so easy for them to say they wanted to return to the format of Generation 1 and just copy-paste everything, but they made an effort to try something new. Just because it didn't work out doesn't mean the attempt isn't appreciated. Failure is good, it at least means you're trying something different. Two Paths is the last thing they tried. But because there's no natural way of pinpointing these characters in Franky's episode, we have these shallow and one-dimensional perceptions of them until their individual episodes, by which point, of course, we shouldn't still be trying to figure them out. There's no reason for me to get to episode 4 and still feel like I'm being introduced to a character who's been here from the start. This is especially frustrating when you get to Series 6 because at the end of Series 5, you finally figured out each character and you finally understand them enough to care, then suddenly everything is different. But I'm not there yet. You probably noticed that I've yet to describe what even happens during these episodes, and that's because, well, as many episodes as there are, nothing particularly noteworthy happens. Franky arrives in Bristol and Minnie hates her immediately. Minnie pretends to want to befriend Franky, but then she reveals she's really just playing high school clique mind games. It's pretty juvenile, but oh well. Then we have Rich, who's a metalhead and wants to get laid. Franky recruits his complete opposite, Grace, to help him get laid, but they start to have a thing for each other, and by the end of the series, they run away with the gang to get married. And they don't end up doing that. Aloe lives on a farm and his parents don't think he can do anything. Minnie lives with her mom, who she doesn't like, and eventually her mom's boyfriend, who she hates. Nick and Maddie are brothers, and Nick is the responsible one. Maddie is the prodigal son who returns and starts fucking things up, including having a fling with Liv and flirting with Franky in the most uncomfortable way.
I'm a no good shit magnet. I'm nothing.
So why do I see a glorious fucking head fuck thing?
After a fight with Minnie, Liv starts sleeping with Nick and later with Maddie. For a few episodes, Nick and Maddie are in complete disarray over their shared affections for Liv. Nick is jealous, Maddie is jealous, and they both really want Liv. And then in Series 6, eventually they're gonna copy this exact storyline, but just replace Liv with Franky. I'm not there yet. The attraction between them is supposed to be so intense and undeniable that Maddie, despite actually spending more time talking to and being with Liv, wants Franky badly. In episode 9, after Nick and Liv have agreed to stop their whole thing, Franky and Liv want Maddie to choose which one of them he wants, and he chooses Franky. Suddenly, Liv, who had been in the center of a love triangle, is now completely alone, and by Series 6, everyone's in love with Franky! Another thing we can blame this season on are the plot points. The bad mix of genres, the drastic tonal shifts, the sideline characters and storylines, the rushed elements, Grace's death. Oh yeah, Grace dies, and Jesus, if you thought Freddy's death was unnecessary. But the main thing that tears this generation apart, more than fans growing out of skins or feeling betrayed by it, more than the weak character explorations, more than all of the narrative elements that don't quite work, the thing behind it all is Brian Elsley. It's no secret that Franky Fitzgerald is one of the worst characters to come out of the stew, that is, the Skins television universe. Even before I bothered to watch this generation, I had heard all about how much everyone disliked Franky. I wish I could look back on the series and say, actually no, Franky was a great character. You know, like I do with most of my videos. I wish I could tell you that she wasn't that bad, but I would be lying. It's not Dakota Blue Richards' fault that Franky became such a shit character. Hell, it's not even Franky's fault that Franky became such a shit character. When we talk about bad character writing, it's usually in the vein of, wow, this character development sucks ass, or damn, this is the worst character progression I have ever seen. That's what makes Franky so special, because we don't see her develop or progress. The art of transformation and growth isn't anything we can appreciate for her because it doesn't fucking exist. In the early days, it wasn't uncommon for folks to blame Franky's development on the actress playing her and not on, you know, the fucking showrunners running the show and writing the plot points and shit. When this generation began, Franky was one of the best things about it. She was unlike any character the show had focused on previously. Cast members have spoken about these seasons of the show and how their generation was meant to come off more as a group of outsiders than a group of cool kids. Though I'd argue the only cool people in Gen 1 were Tony, Michelle, and Chris, and everyone else was either considered a loser or a nerd. That's not important though. Franky was the best kind of outsider. She brought a unique perspective to the show. She had killer fashion sense, and Dakota brought a vulnerability to the character that was really refreshing and fucking exciting. I have tons of problems with the first episode, but none of those include Franky or Dakota's performance. She's one of the strongest dramatic actors in the main cast, and even with the unfortunate thing that happened to her character, she gave a solid performance. We first meet Franky, and she's this frequently misunderstood outcast who is made the target of bullying and jokes. She dresses sharply in suits and neat sweaters and always has her hair slicked back. She looks fresh as hell. The wardrobe choice is intentional. It's the most comfortable for her. Although Franky never says it and the word is never uttered in the show, the fandom appropriately recognized her as being genderqueer, and it was very revolutionary to see her on TV, right down to the moment when she's asked if she's into boys or girls and she answers,
No, I'm into people.
In her episode, she's once again harassed for the way she dresses, and after Minnie, Liv, and Grace take her to the mall, they have her try on makeup and a dress. Basically, Minnie tries to change her into someone she considers to be worthy of her time. Afraid of being harassed at this new school too, Franky puts on eyeshadow the next day and tries to dress in a way that's more feminine, but she hates it.
Basically, if you can, like, choose your identity, because I tried today, and now I feel kind of less like me. I kind of like it less when I'm trying not to be me.
She ends up burning the dress and everything it represents and embraces who she is. People don't like that, they want her to conform, but that's just not her, and it's a fantastic beginning for a really promising character. Fans took note of the aggression Minnie had towards Franky and saw how much sexual tension there was between them. At one point they even kiss, and despite the weird thing going on with Maddie, fans were really hopeful that Franky and her relationships would go down a road that Skins had yet to traverse. Then, on January 23rd, 2012, upon the premiere of the 6th season, Franky Fitzgerald, as we knew her, died in front of her very eyes. I've seen so many people defend or try to make sense of this sudden shift in her characterization. People who argue that it makes sense that someone who was very pointed about her discomfort in dressing a certain way would suddenly be okay with it. People have said that she changed because of Grace's death, and no, she was already different before that happened. People have said that this series was new terrain, and after the lukewarm reception to Series 5, the producers wanted to make it more like the old Skins. We know that's not entirely the case, because they were saying they wanted it to be like the old Skins straight out of the gate. But it is partly true because Season 6 is basically copy-paste Season 4. So here's what happened. Brian Elsley, gallivanting in Toronto, is overseeing the production of MTV's Skins, which was really bad and was cancelled almost immediately. Meanwhile, Jamie Britton decides to step down as showrunner, and his collaborators Toby Welch and Neil Duncan are to step in. But after Skins US ends, Brian Elsley returns to the UK to oversee the production instead. He's seen that the ratings for Skins are going down, and he's seen what Britton was trying to do with the show, and specifically what he was trying to do with Franky. Hands down, the most interesting character in that generation. Then he vetoes everything about her. Of all the things that didn't work, like the dropped storylines between Liv, Maddie, and Nick, that was stupid to begin with, but then the way it fizzles out is just, you know? The way some characters are made to do things because the writers wanted it to happen but didn't want for it to make sense. Out of all the things that were wrong with the show, Brian Elsley set his sights on Franky and Grace. He decides the thing that's missing from the show isn't the charm of Generation 1 or the memorable characters. He decides the thing the show needs more of is the thing that had, for a time, been the most hated. Skins Series 4. April Pearson, who played Michelle in Generation 1, started doing interviews with her fellow actors in 2020. She specifically interviews actors who, like her, had the experience of being in something that became super popular to the point that people can't differentiate between the performer and the character, hence the title of what has now become a podcast, Are You Michelle from Skins? When the show was still exclusive to IGTV, April interviewed Dakota Blue Richards, who spoke about her experiences on the show for the first time, and about Franky's sudden shift in the second half. Dakota wasn't even sure if she wanted to return for Season 6 at all, but after Season 5 was complete, she saw a lot of positive responses to Franky's character from people who were happy to see someone like Franky represented. The only reason she returned to the show was because she wanted Franky, this important character for so many, to still be there for them. And they fucked that up.
When we came to shoot episode 1, we had costume fittings, and we all had to do basically like a bikini parade for Brian, and you know, they needed to okay what we were going to be wearing. They had picked for me one of those like striped, almost like Victorian, like a sort of play suit, swimsuit with like shorts and sleeves.
I know the one, yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was absolutely, you know, in line with Franky's aesthetic up to that point. I remember coming out and, you know, standing there in front of Brian and the costume team, and he looked at me and he said, "I'm bored, make it sexy." And like that, my character just changed. And suddenly I was presented with scripts where I didn't recognise the character that I was playing anymore. I think, you know, they just wanted, I think really what they wanted is to replace Effie.
For years, fans have always said, that the creators of the show seemed like they were trying to make Franky more like Effie, and Dakota confirmed it. It's just so wild to me that the most disliked series at the time became the blueprint for Series 6. All the dark storylines Jamie Britton wanted to get away from are back. In Morocco, Franky meets a teenage drug lord, I know, stupid as hell, named Luke. And it's not like the first generation didn't have its fair share of stupid-ass plot points. I know we'd all like to pretend the sketch thing never happened, but it did, and we have to accept that. Shortly after that, Grace is killed in a car accident. In the second episode. No, because we need to talk about this. For some reason, after Chris's death, it became a signature of the show to kill off a character with each generation. The thing is that Chris is the only time it made sense. It was established that Chris's older brother, Peter, died suddenly when they were little, the result of an unspecified genetic condition. What's important about this scene isn't just Peter's passing, it's also the fact that Jal, one of Chris's closest friends, didn't even know Chris had a brother. The scene hints at the way Peter died, but it also establishes that Chris is good at hiding himself, and he's good at keeping the most vulnerable parts of himself secret from everyone else. It also works because later, when Chris and Giles start dating, it doesn't feel random because as early as episode 4 in season 1, they were confiding in each other. Giles was the only person who knew about Peter for the longest time. By the time we get to series 2 and we find out that Chris has been living with the same condition that killed his brother and that he doesn't take his medication, it's not surprising that he would keep such a thing secret. It makes sense that he would keep that private, and even though it's a surprise, it works because, guess what? Everyone who knows him is just as surprised as we are. It was surprising when he died, because he was getting better, but the fact that he had been sick and wasn't feeling 100% made his death one of those things that was shocking, but at the same time, something you felt kind of prepared for. It was also, in the entirety of Skins, the most haunting death scene. And really, it was the only character we saw die. Chris is with Cassie, and everything is fine, but then he starts convulsing, and she's holding him, and she's terrified, and we're terrified. And there's nothing any of us can do but watch the light slowly fade from his eyes, and holy shit, I'm about to cry. Chris's death was so heartbreaking, and felt so real that in the 13 years since that episode aired, the image of him taking his last breath is burned into people's memories. Freddy's death, on the other hand, is the dumbest shit I ever seen in my life. First of all, everything that happened in Series 4 was dumb. So when I say Freddy's death was the dumbest, you know I mean it. He gets killed by Effie's psychologist who was obsessed with her. The therapist literally bludgeons him to death with a baseball bat. Like, not like Brian Elsley bludgeoning Franky, but like actual bludgeoning. It's the most random fucking thing, and it barely even fits in narratively. Like, no one even knows Freddy dies except Cook. We don't see anyone grieve, and maybe that's just a big part of why Chris's death felt the way that it did, because we do see so many people grieve. Then at the start of Series 6, Grace dies. And it's senseless as fuck. When I say Elsley wanted to repeat Series 4, he wanted everything right up to the random death scenes. I don't understand the decision to kill Grace to begin with, or anyone for that matter. None of the deaths after Chris felt important. Every time it just made me roll my eyes. Worse yet is the fact that Grace can't even be dead in peace. She's too busy appearing as a ghost to almost everybody. She'd be calling people on the phone and everything. But I especially don't understand killing off Grace at the start of the show. Who does that? It's like Jamie Britton decided the show should be more lighthearted and Elsley came back from his failed Canadian remake and was like, "No son, you better kill somebody right now, I swear to God." It's as if Elsley decided the worst things about the show were Franky and Grace, and that either literally or figuratively, they had to die. For a character to be killed figuratively, they have to be either destroyed and stripped of all the things that made them unique, like Franky, or they have to be cast off to the side even when the storyline really needs them, like Rich. After Grace's death, the show immediately moves on to other things. There's episode 2 centering Rich, where we see him sort of dealing with the fact that Grace is in a coma. He's been banned from seeing her in the hospital, and he responds to this by breaking into Grace's house and throwing a party. I feel like that's very unlike Rich to begin with, but alright, he's grieving. Rich and Aloe have also started a band. It was Aloe's idea, and later you find out that this was a genuine attempt on his part to make the whole situation easier on Rich. This is as far as we get with explorations of Rich's well-being and eventual grieving process. At the end of the episode, we find out that Grace has died. It's a sad moment, especially because Rich imagined that she was alive and well the night before. There's a tender moment between Grace's father and Rich, one that's become one of the stronger points in the series.
Actually, she died yesterday afternoon.
I just spoke to her. I speak to her all the time.
Me too. What else is there to do?
Alex Arnold does an amazing job. He commits to all these little nuances that give a little more realism to a character who, had he been in anyone else's hand, would have fallen flat. I remember watching this episode for the first time, getting to the end and thinking it was a really strong finish. I was actually eager to see the next episode, to see how everyone was dealing with the aftermath of Grace's passing, and to see them develop more. Y'all, tell me why I get to the next episode and there's a whole ass new character in my face. Alex joins the gang in series 6, and he's clearly meant to make up for Grace being gone and to get the gang out of their grief. In other words, Alex is an excuse not to show any of them grieving. It sucks because I like Alex. I think he's a cool character, and Sam Jackson is quite charming. No? Not that Sam Jackson. That Sam Jackson is charming, but he's not in Skins. Surprisingly, Alex is just a very distinctive and interesting character, and I personally thought his episode was really strong. He's taking care of his grandmother, and he's supposed to be packing up her things so she can stay in a home, but he isn't. He keeps telling his dad he is, but he doesn't want his grandmother to go into a home, and he's trying to prove that she'll be fine so long as she has someone to take care of her, and that he could be that someone. He also carries around this card with a bunch of numbered dares written down. With it, he carries a dice, and at any given moment he'll roll it and do whichever dare has the same number. He does this like a minute after we first meet him.
Everyone else does.
I'm really sorry.
What the fuck was that for?
It's numbers, mate. Only numbers.
Some people dislike Alex because of the die thing, but I always thought it was more insight into his character. Like, I looked at this and I thought, oh, this kid likes the dice man. All right, I see you. I thought they fumbled Grace completely, but I also thought Alex could be another positive for the show. Unfortunately, after introducing him, he gets sidelined like everyone else. The wild thing is that Alex's episode is the closest the creators get to recreating that Gen 1 magic they were trying so hard to capture.
Sometimes.
Oh, really? Really? I practically had my tongue down your throat.
Yeah, and that was a nice thought.
Oh, Jesus!
And he was a good character, but eventually they lost interest in giving him anything to do. The producers aren't interested in giving more attention to other characters or storylines either. Their priorities this time around are the Maddie, Nick, Franky love triangle, because everyone's in love with Franky. The Franky and Luke thing it's really dark and disturbing, and I don't want to get into it, sorry. And we get some bits about Minnie and Aloe because they start having a thing and Minnie gets pregnant. But the thing that really takes precedent in the show is that Franky is caught between two brothers. Suddenly Nick has fallen in love with her, and we have no idea how that happened. I mean, no, we know why, but you know what I mean. This series is the last we have of the generation, but no one cares about giving them any growth or an ending that feels suited to them. I can't say the ending to Gen 1 was the happiest. I mean, we lost Chris for fuck's sake, but the ending felt complete. Tony and Michelle amicably realize they're no good for each other. Sid goes to New York to find Cassie. Tony and Sid have the sweetest goodbye. Maxie, Anwar, and James, Maxie's boyfriend, who we never get to actually know, and that still bothers me, go to London together. And it's really sweet because Anwar thinks he's saying goodbye to his best friend, and Maxie's like, you can still buy a ticket though, let's get out of here. And Giles stays behind by Chris's grave. She and Chris's father talk, and he apologizes for not inviting her to the funeral. Together they mourn him, and it's pretty sweet too. Things don't have a completely happy ending, but it was still a satisfying ending. Except for Michelle. I always say I wish she got more development, and that's one thing that I thought MTV Skins did kind of well. They did that better than UK Skins. Gave Michelle something to do. In Series 6, it just feels like they were in a rush to tie everything up and did the writing equivalent of shooting every storyline in the head to put them out of their misery. I would be absolutely remiss if I made an entire video about the production of Skins and I didn't talk about the glaring truth at the center of it. April Pearson's podcast, the one I mentioned earlier, has seen a lot of guests, including a few Skins alumni, join on to talk about their experiences on set. April has spoken about how unprotected she felt during the production of Series 1, during the sex scenes specifically. The fact that actual teenagers were playing teenagers on screen was pretty cool, especially at the time, but the fact that actual teenagers were recruited to do so many scenes partially nude and to participate in sex scenes was not. Leia Lewis, who played Liv, spoke about how daunting and even scary it was to go from a schoolgirl who worked a part-time job to going on set every day and having to do so many sex scenes. In Series 5, the sex scenes are quite minimal in comparison to earlier seasons and then later Season 6. And the few sex scenes that did exist had Leia in the middle of it. When Skins was being filmed, there was no such thing as an intimacy coordinator. And it's one of those things that seems so obvious that one would need, but intimacy coordinators didn't really begin to work in the industry until 2016. It's something that these young actors working on the show could have really used.
Can you actually describe your role, your day-to-day as an intimacy director?
A large part of that is consent work, teaching it, unpacking it, figuring out what that is at this time in our culture. The second part of that is protocols, and that can be something as simple as we have some nudity, and making sure that when we're in tech and an actor is asked to hang out on stage for hours, that maybe they're in a robe.
Touching, you can say so much with that. You have no clue what could be happening up on that stage that might seem okay, but actually might be inappropriate between the two actors.
As Lewis said,
and then, yeah, I just felt like we weren't prepared enough to just deal with what it would be like filming. I turned 18 right at the beginning of filming, so I just had so many more sex scenes than everyone else. My first day was a sex scene. And I think,
same.
Yeah, and I do think like, it's fair enough, you know, we're actors, we're acting, but I do think if you want to pluck children out of the street, which is essentially what they were doing in order to have like this authentic on-screen thing going on, I think, you know, there needs to be a level of like, just a bit more, and you could say, okay, we've seen the show, we knew what we were getting ourselves into, but just a bit of like help or like talk through things, I don't know, but it was just a bit much to be like, bang, day one, here you are.
And upon Elsley's return to the show, things got a little darker. Leia recalled a time when she and other female cast members were made to wear their bikinis in front of an unnamed, much older producer so he could judge whether or not they were hot enough to pull it off. And Dakota recalled a similar experience.
I definitely felt a lot of pressure to be smaller or slimmer or I don't know. There was one point where we were told to like skip breakfast and for dinner we should just eat a jacket potato. Series 6, like we all had to have a meeting and we were told, to like basically skip meals. And I was the main one speaking up, and I remember saying like, well, we all look, you know, the same pretty much as we did last year. And I remember so-and-so, whoever, not gonna name names, looking at me and going, do you, Leia? Do you all look the same as you did last year? And there was also this moment where we each had to, when we were filming, because we had to go to Morocco on the first episode of season 6, and we each had to, in a bikini or our swimwear, one by one, stand in a room with just us and the creator of the show, who was male and a lot older than we were then. I mean, we were between the ages of 16 and 18, and be told whether we looked good or not, good enough to film in Morocco. And the costume asked me to go first because they were like, Leia, you know that you're the most comfortable, and if you go first, it will show the other girls that, you know, it's not that bad. But it was bad.
And what did he say?
He said, you look great, Leia. You look great. And I will never forget that moment. It was, and at the time I thought it was horrible, but I think it's so much fucking worse now.
Yeah.
So, Yeah.
This is the conversation I'm having a lot with alumni is, you know, at the time you're young, you don't know any better, you don't really know what to say, speak out, is this okay? And as with a lot of victims of trauma, you look back at it and go, yeah, that was
not okay.
That was fucked up.
Skins always gets a lot of props for having teenage cast members play actual teenage characters, but no one has ever considered what it must be like to be a teenager playing these roles. Having to do all of these sex scenes and partial nude scenes as soon as you reach the age of 18, no matter how you look at it, this was an exceedingly harmful environment to put children into. I mean, children. Dakota mentioned in her interview that during Series 6, she was literally studying for her A-levels. And I have no way of properly concluding this section other than to say, thank God for intimacy coordinators. Stop putting children in situations like these, and also, why are so many producers, directors, and writers so obsessed with the sex lives of teenagers? It's really weird. Also, April Pearson, Leah Lewis, and Dakota Blue Richards are extraordinarily brave for speaking about their experiences, and I just wanted to say that.
And I think also there had been so many other times in the course of the first season where things had happened that I look back on now and think were really, really inappropriate. At the time, we felt so grown up because, you know, we were going into bars underage and drinking and, you know, taking drugs and whatever, like, and we were working and then we had loads of fucking money. But so we thought we were so grown up, and I look back at it now 10 years on and go, Jesus, we were children.
I know I have a tendency to make things sound really bad, but that doesn't mean Gen 3 didn't have any high points. I'm really fond of aspects of Minnie's episode in Series 5. She's a virgin who is genuinely afraid of having sex. Nick keeps pressuring her and she keeps making excuses. At one point, she even steals his house key so they can't go there and she doesn't have to do it. I appreciate this because so often in teen movies or shows, they make it seem as if every teenager is just desperate to fuck. And that just isn't as true as media depictions make it seem. Her anxiety about sex is refreshing, as weird as that sounds. You already know I fuck with Franky. I don't like everything about episode 1, but I like her. And I like that she burns this dress, and I like that she embraces herself and that she's kidnapped by Rich and Aloe and Grace and they all hang out together. I think it's really sweet. I miss Franky's odd quirks and her sharp fashion sense. I think out of all the bad things about the show, Franky's change is the most disappointing. The show owed her so much more than what she got. Dakota was the only person who tried to fight for Franky, who tried to save her from this horrendous fate, and she got screamed at.
They screamed at me. I don't think I've ever been so told off in a professional setting, and I vowed never to talk about it again.
So thank you, Dakota, for not only coming forward with all of this stuff, but for trying to save a character who really needed to be saved. I have to admit that I didn't fully appreciate Rich and Grace. When I first watched, I wasn't that into them, but then I watched the show again for this video, and I realized I was a little too harsh before them. They were genuinely cute. And in a show that got so dark and was so unnecessarily dramatic, even in Series 5, it was nice to have them be a source of light. And honestly, it kind of just makes me more mad about Grace's death now that I'm talking about it, but this is not good for my health. And more than anything, many actors in this generation are great. I mean, for real, they just sometimes had shit material to work with. Like, okay, look at Dakota. She played 2 different people in one show, and she absolutely made it work. And keep in mind that all of these changes about her character were just as surprising to her as they were to us. And she bodied that still. There are so many things about Franky that are upsetting or disappointing, but Dakota's performance is not one of them. It's all too common for actors to face the brunt of bad shows or bad movies. If a storyline doesn't make sense, fans will sometimes call out the actors as if they had any say in the matter. matter. They become the face of this thing, and people only ever think of them as that. It's really unfair, and in this case especially so, because the actors were the few people trying to make this work. Oddly enough, the actors seemed like the only ones who loved Skins, and by the time they joined on, the writers and producers seemed to have lost interest in telling an interesting story. I feel for the actors, not just because the show wasn't received well, but because everyone around them got lazy. They joined onto a project they were passionate about and excited about, and no one else seemed to care. Not to mention the absolutely abysmal treatment they received at the hands of producers. The truth is that the series with Gen 3 is bad. It's a bad show. It is. But it's also true that it didn't have to be. It had more potential than what it gets credit for. It had more opportunities to do amazing things. The most amazing things we would have seen since Gen 1. And the truth is that those opportunities were taken from them. This isn't a case of a bad show that just went wrong because of bad acting. The acting was mostly solid. This is more of a case of irresponsible showrunning, lazy writing, and what happens when creators stop caring about the things they create.